Welcome to Book Buddies, the podcast full of book reviews, rankings, and all sorts of activities with books. I'm Louisa Hammond, self-proclaimed book dragon with a Bachelor of Arts in English with an emphasis in creative writing, as well as theater. In my last video, I gave you my spoiler-free thoughts on Sunrise on the Reaping, and today I'm going to rank all 5 books in the Hunger Games franchise. Now, like I mentioned in my previous video, I've only read all these books one time. So feel free to do that information as you will and understand that our opinions may not be the same. Now, with all that out of the way, let's get started. So coming in at number 5, I'm putting Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Now, I heard that when this book came out and was announced that Snow would be the protagonist, a lot of people weren't too keen on that. I would say, now that I've read it, I didn't really mind that Snow was the main character, or that it was even in third person, but I thought that the execution hurt it, especially since it was also in the 3 sections, just like with the rest of the books in this series. My main issue was the last section. I think Suzanne Collins wanted to make sure all 3 sections were about the same length, when really they didn't need to be, and I felt as though the third section really should have just been shorter, and I think having it happen entirely after the games hurt it. And also, this book is about 100 pages longer than the rest of the series, including Sunrise on the Reaping, and it didn't need to be that long. I think another thing that I didn't really love about this book was I couldn't really care for the characters as much. And however, I would say this was still a decent book. I liked getting to read a little bit more about what the games were like before Katniss and Peeta had to compete in theirs, and seeing how it was a lot less glamorized. It definitely leaned more into the brutality. I mean, by the time the games actually started, a lot of the tributes had already died, and I think getting to see how Snow ultimately rose from poor kid with decent family connections to president, or on his path to become president, was interesting to read. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it. Next up on this list is Mockingjay. This is generally seen as the least liked of the original trilogy, and I have to agree. I think there wasn't as much action in the previous ones, which I would say was a highlight of this whole trilogy, and I think the ending was kind of rushed. It just felt like everything tied up too quickly, and strangely, while Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes was a little too long, I think there could have been a few more pages added to Mockingjay. Not too many, but just a few more, so the ending felt a little bit more smooth and less rushed. However, I overall enjoyed this book. I thought it was a decent ending to the trilogy. I liked some of the reveals given throughout this book, such as with Finnick not being forced into essentially being a prostitute rather than and being this womanizer that he was kind of portrayed as in Catching Fire. And I think the build-up for a lot of the book was well done. I enjoyed seeing more of the Hanging Trees song becoming the anthem of the rebellion. And also, I appreciated the epilogue of this book. Some people might compare it a little bit to the epilogue with the Harry Potter franchise, where you have your main characters older, they're now married and have kids, but it's not necessarily a full-on happily ever after, like with a lot of other books that might have an epilogue like that, because I think overall The Hunger Games is a more mature and somber trilogy, so I think having a more yes-no ending to trilogy worked really well. In the middle of this list, I have the newest book in the Hunger Games franchise, which is Sunrise on the Reaping. I have a whole review dedicated to the specific book, so I'm not going to touch all of my feelings. So if you want to hear more, just check out my review. I think it was really fun seeing Haymitch as the main character, especially because he was a prominent character throughout, and we heard stories of his game. Katniss and Peeta watched them in Catching Fire, so actually getting to see him live out those games and understanding better why he's so closed off and standoffish when we finally meet him in the original trilogy was great. But this was probably the most emotionally draining of the books, although this was the only one that wasn't spoiled for me because I got into the franchise a little later. But it was kind of crazy seeing how much Suzanne Collins can rip my heart out. So, and I would say it does suffer from a little bit of prequelitis, specifically a little too much fan service, and we already know everything that's going to happen, so some scenes felt a little dragged out. You're kind of just waiting for some characters to die. But overall, I loved reading this book. I liked getting to see a new perspective and the ultimate payoff and with the epilogue. Coming in at number 2, we have The Hunger Games. I absolutely love the world building of this book, both for the world itself and the characters with their situations. And I really loved the action of the games. This is probably the book where we get the most action and time in the arena, which I really love. And I also love how Katniss was technically not the chosen one. I think it helps her stand out from a lot of other main characters, and it gives her a sense of agency in the story where you realize she didn't actually have to be here. She chose to be here so her sister Prim didn't have to compete. And I love getting to see all of the little twists and turns, because even if a good chunk of the franchise was spoiled for me before I read The Hunger Games, I got to see how Katniss learned Peeta was in love with her. It was quite the scene. I remember immediately taking a picture and sending it to my sister, saying like, "Oh my gosh, Peeta's brave enough to Peeta's so brave before he even enters the arena, because he showed the world that he was in love with a girl who had to die for him to survive." So yeah, the first Hunger Games book, absolutely great debut novel of this whole franchise that I think we should strive to go for quality whenever we try to make a new series. As for the number 1, it's gonna have to go to Catching Fire. So I loved how this book expands the world of the first book. We get to see a little bit more of the capital and more of Panem, especially with Katniss and Peeta going around on their victory tour. I also loved seeing more of the previous victors, such as Finnick and Joanna, learning a little bit about how people won their games and how they're doing post-victory. And also we have a lot of excitement, especially in the third section when the games primarily are in its peak. And then we end with the big cliffhanger with District 12 being destroyed. I also love, once again, how Peeta brings drama to the Hunger Games. First, it was that he was in love with Katniss, and now she's pregnant! Although she actually wasn't pregnant, but I just loved that scene, and I love Peeta. And I really enjoy this franchise, and I look forward to rereading it in the 2030s. Although this time, I think I'll read it in chronological order, starting with the prequels. So that is my ranking of the Hunger Games series. If you enjoyed listening, please share this with your friends and consider following me. I'm Louisa Hammond, and I'll see you next time.